Work session and regular board meeting to order. Mr. Morrow, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Phillips.
Here.
Ms. Cowan.
Here.
Mr. Skrull.
Here.
Mr. Belfrom.
Here.
Ms. Groff. Ms. Groff is phoning in remotely. She'll be able to take part in discussion, but she is unable to vote due to law changes effective July 1. But she is present through Zoom.
Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And may I have a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Morrow.
Ms. Phillips.
Yes.
Mr. Skrull. Yes. Ms. Cowan.
Yes.
Mr. Belfrom.
Yes. First on this evening's agenda is our safety and security update. Mr. Sears, are you?
Yes, sir. Thanks, Mr. Belfrom. This evening, Mr. Lucky and myself wanted to take a little bit of time to share some information with the board, answer any questions that the board may have, and talk about some current progress and where we are with safety and security. As you know, across the entire nation, there's significant incidents that have taken place involving a lot of different areas, but including schools as well. And when things happen, we consistently reevaluate where we are, the procedures that we put in place, and our first and foremost goal in our district is the safety of our students and staff. And so as leaders within the district, we've worked together with our own staff. We've partnered with the Warren County Sheriff's Office, who have been great partners with us. We've had numerous discussions this summer analyzing where we are and where we could be, and trying to stay to the forefront to ensure that our students and staff are safe, and take the necessary precautions for that. So throughout the presentation tonight, Mr. Lucky's going to go through a number of things about where we are currently, things that we're doing, and we'll be updating, and then we'll talk about some options moving forward for us. This is a presentation tonight. It's not a votable item at this point, but it's just to update the board on progress on where we are, things that we are considering. Any actionable items that come from this would certainly be brought to the board for approval at a later date. But we want to give you where we are and sort of a tentative proposal moving forward on what we believe will help increase the safety and security efforts within our district. So I'll turn this over to Matt Lucky at this point.
All right, thank you, sir. I'm going to start by just talking about what we've done in the past, where we are currently, from a procedural and different products that we do utilize as a district. All districts are unique in what they do offer. This is where we are. We're very proud of the work that's been done long before us and currently got us where we are. So to start, just what we have done, we have a Raptor visitor management system that does a background check with a license swipe at entry. You may be more familiar with it being called Lobby Guard. Raptor purchased Lobby Guard last year. So conversion over to Raptor is happening this summer, but the process itself is the same. Each visitor that comes to the building swipes their license. There's a background check that's done. They get a picture badge that they are to wear in the building if they're visiting. With COVID, it's been very limited, our visitor options, but we still utilize that system every day in the buildings, at all buildings. Navigate Prepared is another program that we have for all of our buildings, all of our staff, all of our first responders locally have access to the system. It's a tracking information system for all of our students by class. So if we go into a fire drill, a lockdown drill, the app alerts the building itself that's in that alert. You're able to chat and share information in that system. And there's multiple alerts from tornado fire, to intruder, to someone's injured. So that system is a great way for us to communicate in any situation where it's necessary to get multiple people involved and get them information at one time. Mark's radio system, all of our buildings are equipped with the orange button. That orange button is strategically placed so that as soon as it's hit, it's an open line of communication to all first responders in Warren County. We've fortunately, but unfortunately, had the opportunity to have a drill, an accidental button push several years ago at the junior high that really showed us what the response time is for first responders here. And we are very blessed to have a very low response time for many people to be able to get to the district. And we witnessed what happened on that afternoon. It was an impressive show of force very quickly. So that's in all of our buildings as well as a bus garage. Each of our buildings has a door badging system where people are buzzed in. It's almost a corral. There's a second door model where people are buzzed into the first door, they check into the office, and then they're buzzed into the building. Can't just walk into the elementaries, high school, or junior high, or CIS. We have camera placements, not just on the entryways. Those are the more important camera locations. We have cameras throughout the district, internally, externally, that allow us to monitor what's going on in each building. Kansas is one of the first school districts really in the country that proposed and put in place the barricade classroom door lockdown system. You'll see these in every classroom, offices. See one right behind me that allows us to lock a room down and nobody's getting in through that system. We have bullet resistant film at each of our buildings and the glass entryways to slow down any intruder. Our staff go through a tremendous amount of training when it comes to stop the bleed. Every new staff that comes in, run, hide, fight, where to place themselves if there's an issue, intruder, fire, tornado. There's lots of emergencies that can happen in a school. One of our biggest concerns is I-71 and a chemical spill. That's a huge deal that we work on with our local law enforcement and first responders to figure out, hey, what are you going to do? Shut down your HVAC system to quit circulating air. There's lots of things that we need to come up with systems for to be prepared for. Like Mr. Sears said, we've worked with the Warren County Sheriff's Office on the staffing on what we currently have. So our current staffing is one SRO at the high school, junior high, and SLE. And Deerfield Township sponsors one SRO for our Deerfield schools, JF Burns, Columbia, CAMI, and KC, and they both work in concert. So if there's a need where one of them needs to go to support the other at a certain location, they do that. But currently we have a 2 SRO system. Staffing considerations. What we're looking to do, we've worked with Sheriff Sims on how they can staff. So the sheriff's office is not immune to staffing issues as well as anybody in the country right now. What we've worked with him as far as what we have building wise and placement of individuals is to add 2 additional SROs, one for KME and KEC combined, and then one for SLE, as well as 2 campus security individuals that will be at the high school and junior high. So with this increased security, what we would have then is 1 SRO at the high school, junior high, or attached campus, as well as 2 campus security. So we'd have campus security for the high school and the junior high, and they would work in concert together. We would have an SRO for our Columbia and JF Burns end of the district. We would have an SRO for KME and KEC to share, and then an SRO for SLE being a satellite building of the district. Security will do, this would be a new role for us. It wouldn't be a full-fledged SRO, but they'd be able to monitor video. Really, they'd be on foot most of the day. So monitoring exterior and interior door checks, making sure doors aren't propped, making sure, people are in the hallways that are supposed to be and the ones that aren't, getting them where they need to be. Monitoring our bathrooms at our high school and junior high level. Just being visible around the building is a great deterrent. We all, if you have a security system at home, you may or may not, it may not be on, but the sign in the yard is a huge deterrent. Just having that physical presence in the building is a big help. Monitoring our hallways during lunches. Lunches are a tough time in buildings because your staff is really monitoring that cafeteria with all the students. This would add that extra person to make sure things are going as the way they should around the building, as most of your administrators are monitoring that lunch. Traffic safety for before and after school, and then in any emergency response. We probably get ambulance run to any of our buildings probably every other week, whether it's a health issue, fall, any sort of things. We're getting responses from township emergency services on a pretty regular basis, and to have someone else there to help get those first responders to where they need to be in the building is important. So the cost. So for 2 SROs, you're looking roughly at $218,000. And then just to kind of break down, $50,000 per for the campus security individuals. So what our proposal is really to have better coverage and quicker response time. What we found that probably the national average is about a 5-minute response time, where we're very blessed to have a 2 or 3 minute response time. The quicker you can respond to these incidents, the faster you can get things resolved. Having that extra presence on campus would make a huge difference in a response time and being available instantly.
One point to add on this slide here that, we've worked collaboratively with Sheriff Sims on looking at different staffing options and additional support. We were able to also work with Deerfield Township for the time period where our students are not in session, offsetting some costs with that if there's a direction we go. In terms of about $50,000 where Deerfield Township would cover that. We'll continue to look for ways to offset the cost of this. But I think Matt just said exactly what I wanted to close this piece with. There's a lot of steps in safety and security that this district has taken to keep the buildings as safe as possible. A lot of infrastructure, entryway changes, badging systems. We wanted to go through that so you could understand that there's a lot of resources that have been put in for that prevention as much as possible. What we're working on and by this type of a proposal is reducing that initial response time. It increases prevention when there's known officers in buildings, but it also reduces the response time in the event that something would happen. And so those are the things that have been important for us as we've started to analyze is, how do we reduce that incident takes place to that response time by breaking apart 2 additional resource officers into shared spaces and buildings that are next to each other. That accomplishes that. Is it ideal at this point? I think we'd like to take a first step into this. Just, as we navigate, does this make us a little bit more safe with our staff and students? So with that, we'll entertain any questions any board has at this point.
I was going to say, for the campus security position, do you have certain qualifications that you've already kind of outlined? Is that something you're still working on for the candidate you're looking for?
We are still trying to mold that. We've reached out to the sheriff's office, neighboring districts, anyone that has that type of role, to try to mold that to make it work for what we need.
And the campus security person, they would be an employee of King's, But the school resource officer, would they still be employed in the off, would they be our employee?
SROs would go through Warren County Sheriff's
Okay, I
Office.
just
So
didn't
those
know.
two additional, so the 4
Okay.
total SROs would be through the Warren County Sheriff's
Okay.
Office.
Okay, thank you.
Matt, can you go into any of the details as far as the difference in an SRO and just having an occasional police officer drop by a building?
Mhm. So our current situation, it kind of to your question, SRO is, I'm sorry, SLE is right down the road a little bit further away. So Warren County Sheriff's Office will roll a car through there multiple times a day, just being a satellite building. You've got your SRO system that we have in place with our 2, and then additional 2. Then there's other things that you can, that we've looked at with the sheriff's office as far as a detail. So when we have events and we need more officers on site, we reach out to those guys and they'll supply us with manpower for that. We've had incidences here where towards the end of the year, we had the car chase, person on foot prior to school. We reach out and make a request to the sheriff's office. Hey, we request more car rolls through buildings today, and they're always very accommodating to that as far as, hey, we understand what's going on, the alertness of the area right now. We'll get cars out to you. Sheriff's office does a great job as far as getting their officers in our buildings. We've got a DARE officer that's at Columbia on a regular basis. So our officers are in and out. Deputy Barker is typically down at that Columbia and JF Burns end, and Deputy Downs is there at the high school, junior high. And they're constantly moving around the buildings, but Sheriff's Office does a great job as far as intermittently stopping in at random times to check in and see what's going on. Does that answer that?
I think so.
Okay, thanks, Peggy.
And the SROs have though specific training for mental health and what to look for and relationship building with students. I know just watching Officer Downs, he does a tremendous job. It's like students are like a magnet to want to go and talk with him.
Absolutely. Thank you for kind of guiding me to this portion of the answer. So an SRO is different than a traffic officer. They do go through special training to talk, they're dealing with the youth of the district and how that happens. That was part of our conversation with Sheriff Sims as far as finding the right people to put in. You can plug and play, but for what we're looking for from the relationships with students, the ability to manage them in the way that they need to, these are a little bit different than your typical person. So we want to make sure we get the right people with the right fit.
Now, are we looking to have somebody in by the first day of school?
That is the goal. So you'll see postings for that campus security as we continue to mold that job description start to come out. Sheriff's already working. They've already started that working communication process of who may have interest, things like that.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Sears. Thank you, Mr. Lucky. Next on the agenda is public participation. King's Local Board of Education encourages all parents, staff members, and community members to attend meetings and encourages visitors to participate in their meetings. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to state his or her reason for addressing the board. We ask that speakers avoid personal attacks on individuals during their public address to the board. If an individual has an issue with an employee, we ask that you request a private meeting with the superintendent or that employee's direct supervisor. Please keep in mind that Board of Education meetings are held so that the board can conduct their business in public. The board president is the spokesman for the board and may need to consult with other board members in order to respond to the public. If a question from the public can be answered immediately, it may be. However, if time is needed to study the issue, the board may choose to make a statement at a later date. Our first speaker this evening, I believe I'm reading this correctly, Josie Will.
I'm here tonight to talk about the levy and say wholeheartedly, capital N-O on the levy. I don't know what the reasons are for this, but in these times of high inflation, all of us have had to tighten our belts. The grocery stores, the gas pumps are killing us. I don't know about all of you, but I know it's made a big difference in my life and what I choose to do. Fiscally, you have to be responsible. To put this out there right now is lunacy. I say no. And I am going to fight like heck. And I'm going to get the word out there to everyone. I don't want to know what your reasons are for it. I don't care. Tighten the belt, work with what you've got. Thank you.
Next speaker is Kim Grant.
My name is Kim Grant, and I'm here tonight as a former King's School Board member to urge the board to do your due diligence and not place a levy on the ballot this November. King's data and numbers prove King's does not need a levy in 2022. School boards have a moral and ethical responsibility to be prudent stewards of taxpayer money, and this is certainly an important time to do it, given what's going on. This board ran on conservative principles, and you do have time to work on a sustainable future by adopting a zero-based budgeting and doing a performance audit and a board-appointed budget committee before asking for any more money. Be the board for the community. Have compassion for families who are struggling with increasing gas and food costs. Many are living paycheck to paycheck, barely getting by. Unlike King's schools, with almost 100% secure income of $57 million to educate our 4,600 students. Please review the 2016 levy information and 5-year forecast I've given you tonight. It clearly shows the board voted to place the 6.2 mils versus the 5.5 to extend the operating levy beyond 3 years. Once the board voted on the 6.2, the administration at the time changed their talking points, thinking the community would never remember, but I do. That levy brings in $4.6 million a year during a period of increasing enrollment, and now you are asking for $7.5 million more without even doing an enrollment projection. And I have not heard any firm numbers on kindergarten for next year yet. Remember, students drive costs. Numbers don't lie. According to the King's 5-year forecast, revenues have increased $15.2 million since 2016. While expenditures increased $15.2 million, and we now have a cash balance increase to $11.4 million. How can you explain the current 5-year forecast, which is projecting a $1.4 million increase in revenues over 4 years and $11.7 million in expenditures? Are we already planning the next levy in 2025? Please take the time to get King's on a sustainable financial plan. This 3-year levy cycle has to end. King's finances are strong. We are only projecting overspending our resources by $1.6 million in 2024. So it is beyond disturbing that the administration has suggested if this levy doesn't pass, this district is at risk of a state takeover. That is not true. Those kind of fear tactics are unconscionable. I know we can solve this issue without a levy and without cutting services to students. Please don't divide our community and hurt our families more during these difficult times by asking for money you don't need now. Please, please do not put this on the ballot.
Next is Deb Gill.
Well, I must say I am completely baffled. I have a sheet here from your recently released financial statement. Now, I admit I am not the best person regarding numbers, but if I understand this information correctly, King's School District is in the black. The black. If I'm interpreting it correctly, I see the June 30th cash balance is over $1 million more than the forecast budget amount. Now, if this is indeed true and accurate, how can you possibly justify asking the taxpayers in this district for more money? My husband and I are retired and are surviving on our monthly Social Security checks. I'm pretty sure that there are other family households that have a budget that's barely in the black, let alone having extra money to throw away where it's not needed. I find it appalling that you are so naive as to believe that people are actually going to shell out more money in taxes when many of us in this district, this state, and in this country are fighting for their lives just to feed their family and put gas in their tanks. No, I take that back. That's not being naive. That's just plain greedy. Now, I'm sure you remember putting a levy on the spring ballot a couple of years ago. We defeated it. Then you changed a few words, put it on the fall levy a couple months later. We defeated it again, even worse than the first time. So I am going to make you a promise. If you all decide to put a levy on this November's ballot for money that you do not need, I will fight it with every fiber in my being. Now, I'm sure you recognize a lot of the people that are sitting here behind me, and I can assure you that the majority, if not all of them, feel just as passionate about this as I do. So I implore you to think twice and revise your plan in regards to putting a levy on the November ballot. If you decide to follow through with your plan, you're going to have a huge fight on your hands, and you'll end up being embarrassed as losers again. And I'll close with this. You all may have plenty of extra money to throw away, but I'd venture to say most of the citizens in this district do not. If you decide to take more money out of people's pockets in these perilous times, I really don't know how you can look your greedy faces in the mirror and sleep at night. It's positively infuriating.
Speaker is Colleen Sheeter.
Good evening. As brought to everybody's attention last month, the three recently elected board members received in-kind contributions from the teachers union and voted to approve the 22-23 teacher union contract, which is a conflict of interest. The same board members will be voting tonight to move forward with a 6.4 mil permanent operating levy. Who is the biggest beneficiary of the operating levy? The teachers union. The same teachers union which pushes CRT and now wants to replace mother with birthing parent? Is this something we really want to support? The same board members campaigned about being fiscally conservative. No true fiscal conservative would vote for a 6.4 mil permanent operating levy without cutting expenses. To their credit, the administration has found some savings, but not cuts. Passage of this operating levy will result in significant number of King's communities members making significant cuts to their personal spending in order to pay their increased real estate taxes. A true fiscal conservative would have proposed actual cuts in expenses in order to attempt to find a middle ground before asking for additional funding from the community. The false narrative, widely believed, is the 6.4 mil operating levy will only last 3 years. This operating levy, like all other King's operating levies, is a permanent levy. It doesn't go away, which lasts until expenses exceed revenues. If expenses are well managed, any operating levy can easily exceed the stated life. The King's administration needs to provide specifics of what changes will be made if the proposed operating levy isn't approved in November or fails. Providing a high-level list of potential changes doesn't provide the board or the community with information needed to make an informed vote. Where will the staff reductions occur? What about reductions in administrative staff? We have an unheard of amount of administrative staff. Which classes and courses will no longer be offered? Which student support services will be reduced? How will extracurriculars and transportation be restructured? Will the busing tier system finally be changed to save approximately $600,000 per year? The board needs to have a real public discussion about the pros and cons of a potential 6.4 mil operating levy. Now isn't the time to take the easy way out by asking for additional funding without making any meaningful reduction in expenses. We need to show the community the school board is trying to compromise. Thank you.
Next speaker is Karen Burton.
Over the past 3 months, I've heard several threats from our treasurer warning that students will be harmed if an operating levy is not passed this year. I have not heard one question and I have not heard one discussion about what administrative cost savings opportunities exist that would not negatively impact students. There are many cost savings opportunities that would not negatively impact students. Why haven't you asked your treasurer to give you an overview of what the 3 administrative buckets of taxpayer dollars are currently spent on? How can you be good stewards of taxpayer dollars if you don't even know how the money is spent? Have you ever looked at the check register report our treasurer attaches to each month's meeting agenda? I have. We paid $97,000 to Complete Care for 1 month of transportation services. Do you know what those services are and whether there is a cost-effective way to provide the same service to those students? I've never heard you talk about it. Have you ever asked for competitive bids for janitorial services or for transportation services? You've been told the board has been spending $3 million a year more than our income. And you were told we need to raise $7 million a year to keep us from being taken over by the state. Ask your 3rd grader if that math adds up. Please don't put a 6.4 mil levy on the November ballot without taking a serious look at cutting expenses first. You cannot pass a 6.4 mil levy while inflation is headed toward 9%. And you've proven you can continue without any cost savings at all if you only pass a 3 mil levy, which you probably can pass. You were elected to represent the voters, so do your job.
Next speaker is Zoe Boucher.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. A lot of passion out there tonight, folks. I hope you're listening and hearing that passion. By just about any poll that you see in the news these days, it seems that just about 75%, perhaps more, of the country is real clear that we're going in the wrong direction. And they mean economically, but I think some of them might also mean culturally. But certainly as concerns what we've been, or what the audience has been talking to you about this evening, is about economics. As I understand it, and I don't do this full time, I know some of you do, we are an extremely top-heavy school district. We have a superintendent, we have an assistant superintendent, we have a business manager. Correct me if I'm wrong, folks. But two assistant. Hey, you know, I'm all for a well-administrated district. But come on, how can you go back to the taxpayers when things are so difficult in our country and ask for more money. Are you trying to tell me you haven't dug deep? I don't believe you have. None of these other people believe you have. We know you're trying to do your best. This is directed to the school board. We know you're trying to do your best, and we support you. But don't let the tail wag the dog. You guys are supposed to be watching these folks that we don't elect. I did want to come in and talk to you about Diversity and Inclusion Committee here in Kings. I was very disappointed. There was a focus group looking for the next superintendent. During that committee, or during that focus group meeting, I felt upset about what was happening in the meeting. Some of the people were being what I thought was pretty negative and pointing out all these big differences. Particularly one of the people who was on the Diversity and Inclusion Committee themselves. So my comment to them and the whole party was, let's stop focusing on what makes us different. Let's start focusing on what it is that makes us the same, that we can agree on here in our community. That person stood up, called me a racist, said she wouldn't, darn it, I meant not to say she, said she wouldn't stay in the same room with me, that she wouldn't stand here and listen to what I had to say. I was shocked that she took offense to me suggesting we focus on what makes us the same, our similarities. And I said to her as she was stomping out of the room, I don't feel like you're valuing my diversity. I don't feel included. I would like to know what the goals, agenda, and purpose of the King's Diversity and Inclusion Committee is, and I would like to be appointed to it. I welcome any information about that. Thank you for your time.
I'm famous for taking notes off podiums. Be careful. Again.
All right, next on our approved agenda for this evening are approval items from the treasurer. Mr. Morrow.
Thank you. So first up, we have year end. Our year end was June 30th. We started processing actually July 1. So my staff was very efficient in closing out 2022 and entering 2023. You can see we had slight differences, less than 1% in revenues and 1% in expenses that led to $1 million better in actuality than what we forecasted. But we still spent over $1 million more than we brought in. And that $1 million difference between the forecast and actual, almost half of it was made up by one check we received from the Warren County Auditor that I spoke to the board about at the last meeting. So I think overall we did a pretty nice job in forecasting year end, and we always like to end better than we forecast, because if you end the other way, you can end up in major trouble. So that was solid results for to where we thought we would be.
Quick question on that.
Absolutely.
So that unexpected check was not in the forecast. Can you refresh everyone's memory what that check was for?
Yes. So Warren County took a look at their finances and their fees that they charge for processing property tax receipts, and they refunded some of those fees back to us. It's something that they try to do every few years, but it's not something we can rely on. So that's why it's not in the forecast.
And that's nothing we've received in the past.
We have received it in the past. But as I said, don't forecast on something we might receive. It's the conservative approach.
Mhm.
There was a chance we were going to get it again, but don't put it in because we can't be sure. Second item I have on the agenda is certificate of available resources. So every year, when we close out a fiscal year and start a new fiscal year, we basically pull a printout of all of our cash balances and the initial estimates for revenues and all the funds. And this is submitted to the county auditor. The board had previously approved the first estimated revenues, and this is just simply updating that sheet with the actual cash balances. fiscal year 22 advances. So we as a government entity aren't allowed to have any negative funds. Can't have any negative cash in any of our accounts. So we had two accounts that we projected to be negative at year end. These are basically clearing accounts for retirements. So we put money in those accounts as it's taken out of folks' checks. And then that money is taken by the state 2 times a month to pay the retirement that we are required by law to pay. So there's some timing differences in there sometimes. We had not to exceed amounts on the June agenda, and this is just the board approving those amounts. As I said, it's just a timing difference. We're required to pay 14% of all employees' retirement into the school employees and teacher employees' retirement. So just a compliance type item that has no effect on actual finances. And I ask the board if they have any other questions on items 1 through 3.
Is it the expense deduction? How much of that is any of that incurred by our personnel savings plan, or those savings you'll see going forward?
Those are savings we'll see effective beginning in September. So what Mr. Belfrom is referring to is our personnel savings plan, where teachers with a lot of experience elected to go ahead and retire, and then we hired them back at a lower salary. And we're estimating we'll save over $250,000 annually. It's a win for us. We save over $250,000 every year. It's a win for the staff because they get to collect their retirement, but also continue to teach our kids. And these are our most experienced veteran folks.
And that retirement is from the state teacher retirement. It's not something that we pay, correct?
That is correct. That is paid from the state teacher's retirement, and we have nothing to do with that. Other than as they work, they pay into that retirement system, and we pay a portion as well. But the monthly checks that they get from the retirement system, we have nothing to do with that.
Thank you.
If you could, Mr. Morrow, with respect to the financial items, the June financials, end of year.
Sure.
Just talk a little bit about how we come up with that forecast and how it's possible that you can, or as a district, we can come in a little lower than the estimated forecast. I mean, I see you have some of it outlined here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we found that tuition, some other costs weren't what we had anticipated based on historical data. But if you could just kind of explain how, you know, based on the forecast, how we could come under based on some of these things that you summarized here, please.
Sure, absolutely. So just some baseline knowledge. The forecast we do twice a year. We're trying to look ahead 5 years, estimating revenues, estimating expenses with the best knowledge we have at that point in time. We are, as a treasurer and as a district, we want to be conservative when we're making those estimates, because we don't want to run into a situation where we didn't foresee potentially running out of money. I can't think of a worse situation than sitting in front of the board in March and saying, I was off $5 million in my forecast and we don't have enough money to make payroll. I don't know what we're going to do. So we always err on the side of being conservative, but to actually build that forecast, a ton of work goes into it. We go line by line of every expense, every code that the district has. We have conversations as an administrative team to try to get a gauge of where our expenses are heading. We use some historical data for some items such as electricity. Historical is going to be your best baseline. And then we use conversations and knowledge about students, for example, to try to get an estimate of what our costs are going to be. A good example of that is special education services. Those are individualized. I couldn't just make that guess off the top of my head. You have to have a working knowledge and a baseline of our operations in order to make those estimates. So it's a pretty in-depth process. Does that sufficiently answer?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I have a question along those same lines. Thinking of the increase in diesel fuel prices and gasoline prices, how will that increase affect what you're forecasting?
Absolutely. It's a great question. That's one of those that it's hard to gauge where we're going to be. This year we spent about $250,000 on fuel. So I build in I like to say, or like to think of it as realistically conservative of an 11% increase for next year, which we've seen some prices come down a little bit. So that may end up being hopefully close. But it's hard for me when I'm trying to look at this in a realistic sense to just say it's going to double. So I'll just double the amount. Realistically conservative is where I try to live. And I'm hopeful that my 11% increase that I build in for fuel in particular is enough to cover it. If it's not trending that way in November, we'll update it and we'll go from there.
And I'm sure Mrs. Arlene House talked with you and did the same thing when you look at food costs.
Absolutely. And that's actually a really good point and something we don't talk about very often. The food service is a self-sustaining program at school districts. So she works very hard to forecast out and do her budgeting to make sure that it is self-sustaining and our operating funds don't have to sustain that.
Any further questions? Mr. Morrow, could you please call the roll? Oh, I'm sorry. I need a motion to approve the treasurer's first 4 items.
I'll make the
First
motion.
3 items.
I'll second that motion.
Mr. Morrow, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Skirl,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Ms. Cowan,
Yes.
Mr. Beltran.
Yes. Next on the agenda, Mr. Morrow, is November 2022 operating levy discussion.
So my predecessor and myself, we've spent nearly 2 years talking finances with the board, some deep dives, some higher level, some comparisons to other districts. We've kind of tried to hit all the bases and as I said, we spend a lot of time and energy trying to figure out where we're going to be in the future based on the knowledge we have today. Mr. Sears and I are just going to give kind of a brief overview of Kings and also what this proposed operating levy will look like.
So as Mr. Morrow mentioned, I know that we've spent the last few months kind of outlining some of the details around the specific numbers and some rationale and where we are. The essential components of this operating levy is really to maintain the quality programs that we currently have. We're not looking at additional adding thing. This is a maintenance. And it's to maintain the quality that we currently have. We have and produce very high student performance across the board. I'm extremely proud of that. And there's a lot of work that goes into our student achievement that we're proud of. There's always going to be continued work that we're going to continue to do to work to improve that even further. But we are a high performing school district. We have a professional staff and staff that put in time. I'm talking all staff, and it says teaching there, it's really all staff. That we have a professional staff that works extremely hard with all of our students in every facet of our business. From a teaching standpoint, we have about 71% of our teachers have a master's degree. They take on extra time, energy, and effort to improve themselves and improve their craft. Our student academic and extracurricular opportunities are tremendous. We have opportunities for students in a lot of different areas and a lot of different facets. Our students are coming out well-rounded with a variety of experiences that are preparing them for life beyond the walls of our school district. That college and career readiness is something that is very important, but it's also the future of where we're going. And there's increased emphasis on providing our students moving forward, providing our students with learning that they get to experience learning in different ways so that they can make accurate decisions for what they want to do beyond the walls of our buildings, but they're also prepared with high levels of skills and also learning what they maybe don't want to do. We know the cost of post-secondary and not of what that is, and it's important for us to provide students with real-world learning experiences in an earlier place so they can make informed financial decisions for what they want to do beyond. Some students are also ready. We want to give them the skills necessary to jump into the trades or to go right into the business world. All opportunities for us to maintain the proposal that we have for the need for a levy is really just a maintenance piece for us that we can continue to improve the services and programs and offerings that we have for students.
So why does Kings need an operating levy now? Efficient spending, we, by all metrics and by all data, we are an efficient spending district. We consistently rank in the top 50 of all districts in the state, but spend in the bottom half of all districts, meaning over half of districts in Ohio spend more than we do. That's just some high level efficiency numbers on a per pupil basis. We have here extend the 2016 levy from 3 years to 6 years. I haven't had a chance to review what was given to me today, but every article I've seen in Inquirer, our own website, it was a 3-year levy. And to the public's point, that levy would continue to be collected, but the estimate was that it would generate enough revenues to allow Kings to maintain their high quality for 3 years. But now we're at 6. State revenues, this is our second largest revenue source other than property taxes. The current projections are they're not going to increase based on the current formula. So the state funds school districts on a per student basis based on property values and income levels in that school district. Kings is above average in both. So the state's formula basically says you need to fund yourself. They're actually giving us more than what their formula says that they should be giving us. That formula is new. That last year was the first year that it was actually implemented. But based on the knowledge we have today, we're not projecting an increase because they're already giving us more than what their formula is telling. Kings is under fiscal oversight by the Ohio Department of Education. And by fiscal oversight, I mean I'm in communication with an ODE consultant. We filed a financial recovery plan, and that recovery plan lays out 2 options, which are the 2 options for any business or any school district. You can pass a levy to increase revenues if your other main source is flat, or you can make significant personnel, student programs, and service reductions. Those are really the 2 things that you can do. The third option is a little bit of both. We've shown the board and presented in prior meetings that we've done a lot to trim around the edges to save and be efficient without affecting student services. But when you talk about cuts, you're talking about personnel, and that's affecting the services to students. So levy facts, 6.4 mils. As Mr. Sears said, It's an operating levy. This is different than the last two levies that were ran in the district. This levy funds day-to-day operations to maintain King's quality. It pays payroll, it pays contracts. It's not made, its purpose is not for facilities, which was the last two levies. The last operating levy, as I said in the previous slide, is 2016. 6.4 mils is less than proposed last year and in line with past levies. So the board considered a levy last year. We came back with a recommendation for a lower levy based on the current forecast and also the current climate. We know it's tough time to be asking for this, and we take that ask seriously. 6.4 mils is projected to last 3+ years conservatively. Once again, this is a conservative estimate that it would last 3 years, and the administration and Board of Education would make every effort to continue that past the 3 years. 6.4 mils will generate approximately $7.5 million annually beginning in 2023. It's a lot of money, but we have a big budget at King's. We spent nearly $60 million this year. So that's a piece of the pie to make us financially stable for the foreseeable future. 6.4 mils, it costs $224 annually or $18.67 monthly for every $100,000 of value at your home. And I wanted to reiterate, this is not how much you think you can sell your house for. This is what is actually, your house has actually been appraised and is on the Warren County books. So $224 annually for every 100,000. I asked the board if they have any questions about any of the facts that we've laid out here, anything we've discussed over the past few months.
Is there any questions? I think we've outlined this in great detail, actually, in the last 2 years, had these financial discussions. Excuse me, it's not time for public participation, Mrs. Grant. You have been a former new board member, as you've stated, so you know procedure. Now, I show you the certain amount of respect and decency when you speak, so please afford that to me and my colleagues. I would appreciate that, ma'am. Thank you. We have any further questions?
Just to get some perspective, so our annual budget is around 60 million, you said. So if you were to break that down to a monthly cost, can you just give us that figure? I know we can do the math, but can you give us that figure?
About $5 million a month.
So if we have 1 point plus on hand in our cash balance, that isn't quite enough to fund a full month of our current budget.
I'll clarify that the point. We have about $11 million, so that funds basically 2 months.
Okay, but the 1 point that someone brought up, that was just an extra that was beyond the forecast.
Correct. That 1.1 was our performance better for the whole year compared to the forecast. So yes, you are correct. That would fund 1/5 of a month.
But currently our cash on hand, we are just beyond that 2 month
Correct.
requirement.
Correct.
70 day, I believe it is.
Yep, and as we've discussed, the national standard is to have 2 months of cash on hand at any given time. So we're just above that threshold right now. And as you can see by just looking at our financials that we've spent more than we've received for a couple years in a row. So we'll be approaching that 60-day threshold very soon.
And we've talked about analyzing transportation. That's something that we are still going to do regardless of what we're
Yes.
pursuing with the levy. that in the beginning in the fall, we're going to look at some of our transportation options. Is that,
Yeah, there's a transportation, absolutely, and we've talked about this with the board and administration, that analyzing our transportation and how that operates, we're doing that regardless of the outcome of this proposal or decision. Now, what that means is we're going to be putting together basically a team of folks that are going to analyze the best approach moving forward to have a recommendation sometime at some point in time next year for the following year. So we're looking at some analysis of that to do that well. And there's opportunity for us to create some efficiencies within our routing system itself. Mr. Lucky has taken the steps and is doing that currently of, for one example is families who are not currently riding the bus. We're having them let us know that so we don't route them. So those are things that some efficiencies that we will begin to build in. But I would expect some outcomes for transportation in the future.
Were there any further questions with regards to? So with that, may I have a motion to approve the November 2022 operating levy
And just to
resolution?
Go
Go ahead, Mr.
Sorry,
Martin.
excuse me, just to clarify that this resolution and its passage formally is requesting me to put this levy on the ballot for November 8th. I just wanted to make sure all the board was aware that
Yes.
this is the resolution that instructs me to do that.
and for clarification, the third vote, there will be one more vote, and that will be to set the election date. Is that correct?
No, this is
Oh,
in
this
the
is
election.
one?
This is in the election date.
Okay.
It specifies November 8th, 2022.
Okay, so is this the final vote?
Correct.
Thank you.
Further questions? May I have a motion to approve resolution to proceed with the November 2022 operating levy?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion. Mr. Morrow?
Mr. Skrull,
Yes.
Mr. Belfrom,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Ms. Cowan.
Yes.
Next on the agenda are approval items for the superintendent, Mr. Sears.
Yes, thank you. So we have in our agenda student handbooks for the 22-23 school year. These handbooks have been reviewed and updated. I know the board can see the edits within there. Some changes in personnel, some procedures. I know there's been an update in some of the code of conduct information for our junior high and high school. And Mrs. Martin has worked with our administrators to streamline some information there. And so these are the handbooks that we would adopt and utilize at each one of our buildings throughout the 22-23 school year.
Anything to add, Mrs. Martin?
He covered it.
So may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items for the superintendent?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Morrow?
Ms. Cowan,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Skrull,
Yes.
Mr. Belfrom.
Yes. Next on the agenda are items presented by the Assistant Superintendent, HR and Business, Mrs. Martin. Mr. Lucky is first, actually. I apologize, Mr. Lucky.
Mr.
Spinner. So I should just say Mrs. Martin, Spinner, Mr.
I'm not doing
Lucky.
his.
Whoever is first. Mr. Spinner, please.
President Belfrom, Kings Board of Education, thank you so much. First item on the agenda under HR and Business, personnel items, which include staff resignations and retirements. New staff members would like to thank you again for our special meeting Friday morning so that we could get ahead of the certification deadline. Staff miscellaneous items, supplementals and stipends, and temporary employment.
Questions on personnel?
Item number 2 has to do with a MOU with our OPSI bargaining group. This is in response to Senate Bill 11, which became effective in June, recognizing Juneteenth, which provides for a paid holiday to our 11 and 12-month non-teaching employees. So this was something that we honored this past a few weeks ago. I believe it fell on June 20th this year because June 19th was a Sunday, but it also folds in the 22-23 school year, which leads me into item number 3, unless there are questions about item number 2. Leads me into item number 3, which is our OPSI agreement. This is, the numbers are exactly the same as our teachers union. It's a 1.5 base increase, same as our teaching staff, along with a 3% learning recovery stipend. We did adjust 2 salary schedules within the collective bargaining agreement, one being our paraprofessionals, the other being our food service workers. This was so that we could continue to be competitive with the market. Mr. Lucky, by and large, did a salary study across several districts, and we found that we were not as competitive as we would like to be. So we did increase those to be, as I mentioned, a little bit more competitive with the market as we're looking for employees in those 2 specific areas. Item number 4 talks about our exempt and non-union employee compensation. Again, same as the teachers, same as our OPSI agreement, a 1.5% base increase, along with a 3% learning recovery stipend. Number 5 talks about administrative employee compensation. Again, a 1.5 base increase, a 3% learning recovery stipend, but this is not to exceed $3,000 for our administrative employees. That's the one change in the 4 agreements. Or the 4 items, I should say.
And if I could, Mr. Morrow, inquiring minds will want to know, how does this impact the budget, sir?
There is a budget impact. The 1.5% hits the general fund for about $125,000. But on the same token, I did want to point out that when we settled on the 1.5% with the teachers union, we did that with help of a mediator to get us to where both sides felt comfortable enough to come to an agreement. And we were lower than the rest of the area in our base increase. So the mediator just say we were lower than the rest of the area. But the learning recovery stipend using ESSER funds, so it doesn't impact the budget at all, helps make up for some of that shortfall that our staff faced in the 1.5%.
Thank you. Please continue, Mr. Spinner. I apologize.
My pleasure. At this time, I am going to pass it along to our business manager, Mr. Lucky, for the SMOI contract for food service.
Thanks, Mr. Spinner. Attached there, you'll see the SMOI contract. No real changes. We've been providing food service to SMOI for a long time. You'll just see some date changes and an extension. SMOI isn't a real revenue creator for us, unlike Lockland, but they are in the district and a great partner of ours. So we do enjoy providing that service for them. Number 7 is a food service update. So the past 2 years, we've been able to provide free breakfast, free lunch to all of our students throughout the year, really. The change, this is I'll just say this is a current, because this is kind of bounced around a little bit as far as going back and continuing that free breakfast and lunch program. But as of right now, we will look at going back to pre-COVID arrangements for filing a application for free and reduced meals, and we'll be back to charging for breakfast and lunch next year. So that will make a little bit of a change in the number of meals, I think, that we're providing for that. So just to keep everyone aware, if you get any questions out in the community, state will not offer that free program. Good part is our reimbursement for those meals did go up. Ms. Phillips, to address that question you have is what's going on with food service. Luckily, the state did increase that reimbursement by 40 cents to help offset a little bit of the fuel surcharges that we're seeing and increase in food costs. Transportation update, it's happy and sad at the same time. So Dave Smith for Peterman has recently retired. Been with us for a long, long time, kind of worked his way up through the ranks. So I want to congratulate him here on his retirement. Good news is he does want to come back and just drive, but he will no longer be the GM. So we're in the process of replacing that staff down there currently. But do want to congratulate Mr. Smith on his retirement. Do appreciate him coming back as a driver because we are actively seeking drivers at all times down there. So everyone out there listening, if you know anyone that's looking, we would love to sit down and speak with you. But congratulations to Mr. Smith and thank him for his service.
Yeah, absolutely. Any questions for discussion regarding these items?
I just want to make a comment about the contracts and things. I think as a board, we worked really well together to provide information to both Mr. Sears and Mr. Moore on what our desires were. And I appreciate all of the hard work that the two of you had to do to take that to the end.
Agree. It's been a significant amount of discussion, negotiation, mediation the last several months. So appreciate all of you for taking care of that. Any further discussion items there? May I have a motion to approve the assistant superintendent HR and business items, please?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion. Mr. Morrow?
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Belfrom,
Yes.
Mr. Skirl,
Yes.
Ms. Cowan.
Yes.
Next on the agenda are approval items for the assistant superintendent involving educational programs. Mrs. Mart.
Good evening,
Mr.
everyone.
Freeman.
And Mr. Freeman. So Matt and I have a few items to share with you tonight. I'll do number 2 right now, the bullying incident report. This is the semi-annual report we share with you every 6 months. And then we also put in the website for the anonymous reporting on the Stay Safe Public School Works. If you can see the new report, we did have reported 6 items that stated bullying and 1 was substantiated. Most of the reason typically that they're not substantiated is it is an incident, but it doesn't fit the deadline, the definition of what it should be. But all of those were looked into as I talked to the administrators. So that's the latest update on that for you. If you have any questions, I can go into more detail.
I have a question, Mrs. Martin. Is this consistent, like this report, with what our counselors see in the individual buildings, or is this just through the hotline?
Just through the hotline.
Okay.
That's a great question because that was a question I had initially too, about this is just what is anonymously
Okay.
reported. Yep.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. I've got 2 items on the agenda this evening. The first one are our school fees for the 22-23 school year. And so these are the grade level school fees. And if you scroll down to the bottom, actually, it kind of gives you an overview by grade level of the proposed 22-23 fees and how those compare to last year's. So you can see that there are no increases at all there. In fact, in 5th grade, there's been a slight change that's decreased the school fee by $5. So those are the school fees for this coming school year.
What's caused that decrease from last year for the 5th grade?
It's a change in workbook. It was less expensive. You can believe it. It's a rarity, I know, but yeah, that was the reason for that. The next item that I have is the memorandum of understanding with the University of Cincinnati to engage in College Credit Plus opportunities for our students. So this is a renewal of an existing agreement that we already have. We have a number of students, of course, that take College Credit Plus classes with the University of Cincinnati at a variety of campuses, both online. We have some students that take classes on the main campus down in Clifton. We also have some students that take in-person classes at the Blue Ash campus from time to time. And then this also involves our engineering program. So our engineering program, Engineering 1 and 2, those courses are both CCP through UC. And so this agreement covers those courses as well. This is a 5-year agreement as well for them.
I was going to ask.
Yes. Any questions?
I'll make a comment. At graduation, talking to some of the students, I was thrilled to see that so many students were entering college as sophomores, thanks to College Credit Plus. And so I'm sure we have many parents who are very happy that their children were able to do that.
I'm one of those parents. And I agree with what Peggy's saying. It's definitely a great program.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I have I'm sorry, any further discussion? So may I have a motion to approve the Assistant Superintendent Educational Program items?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Morrow?
Ms. Cowan,
Yes.
Mr. Skirl,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Beltram.
Yes. Next are items presented by the board. Ms. Phillips, did you have anything to present this evening or any updates?
I have one bit of information. I listened to the OSBA town hall meetings, and the most recent one, they talked just very briefly before the actual town hall session began, talking about schools across Ohio are encouraged to look at the possibility of adding high school students or students as a non-voting member of the board, with all types of things to work out on. You know, would they attend all meetings, some meetings? Would it be in the spring of the year? Would it be all year? And so I think it's just something that I'll do some more research on and pass some more information out to you so we can discuss it further in the future.
That sounds great. Thank you, Mrs. Phillips.
Now, are they opening that up to, like, is it a set number of students or is that not?
That's all part of what we would have to figure out. And they did mention that California currently does that, and it's also a requirement that they have high school students on the Board of Education. Again, non-voting, but they're present at meetings.
Mrs. Phillips, there was an article in the OSBA magazine that came out this past week. I will share with the board, I'll copy it, and it's about that topic.
Oh.
Yes, there's a multi-page article about information on how students can be part of Board of Education. So I'll share that with the board.
Any further items to present?
I don't have an item to present, but I don't mean to put you on the spot, Mr. Morrow, but there's been talk at their last couple meetings about people who are retired and on fixed income. And as far as their property taxes, can you just give a little information for a person who is in that situation? What is available to them as far as special dispensations for their property taxes?
Absolutely. So if you're 65 and older and low income or disabled, you can apply for what's called a homestead exemption. Pretty decent savings on your property tax if you meet those thresholds. And I implore anybody who thinks they may meet those thresholds, give me a call. I know Mr. Nolan at the county auditor's office, they talk to people all the time about it as well. So if anybody wants any additional information, more than happy to talk through their situation with them and provide any data and forms that they need to get that done.
And so just for clarification, it's not something that somebody would automatically receive. They do have to apply.
Correct.
But you'd be able to help someone
Absolutely.
with that process.
Correct and absolutely.
I think that's important for the community to know. So thank you.
How would we get that out to the community? Because not everybody's watching online tonight.
Well, we've got social media, we've got our newsletter. I can talk to Mrs. Gould and figure out a way to get that out to everybody the best way possible.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I like that.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Vice President Calman. Any further items to present? All right, next on the agenda are the legislative updates. Mr. Skrull.
Yeah, just a few items I wanted to touch on tonight. So first one, since we met last, is that Governor DeWine signed into law House Bill 583, which extends the current temporary flexibility for school districts regarding the educational requirements of substitute teachers until June 30th of 2024. Also wanted to note that President Biden, he signed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. This provides funding in mental health services, including funding for school-based mental health and support services. This bill also includes resources for programs to strengthen safety measures around primary and secondary schools. And also to touch on a little bit about what Mr. Lucky was saying about the school lunches. Biden also did sign the Keep Kids Fed Act, which, as he had indicated, it increased the reimbursement rates. And it provides flexibility with meal patterns and nutrition standards, standard requirements. It does not extend the provisions implemented during the pandemic that temporarily allowed children to be eligible for the free meals. However, it does allow students eligible for reduced price meals the opportunity to receive free meals, and it increases the federal reimbursement for those. And then also Governor DeWine signed into law House Bill 99, which states that its intent to overrule the decision of the Ohio Supreme Court in the Gabbard versus Madison Local School Board District of Education. This establishes the Ohio Mobile Training Team and creates the Ohio School Safety and Crisis Center within the Department of Public Safety to be operated by the Ohio Mobile Training Team. It also requires a person a school board authorizes to have weapons in such a zone to submit an annual criminal records check, complete no more than 24 hours of initial training established under the bill, and complete no more than 8 hours of annual requalification training. And these were just passed. It doesn't mean that all schools are going to go this way. He also signed into law House Bill 140, which modifies the form of election notices and ballot language for property tax levies. In addition, House Bill 687 makes capital appropriations for fiscal years 2023 and 2024, which includes $600 million for facilities construction and $100 million of American Rescue Plan Acts for school safety grants. And then finally, the State Board of Education unanimously approved Dr. Stephanie K. Siddons to serve as the interim state president.
Thank you, Mr. Skrull. Any questions?
That made me, well, no, it's gone again. It was here and it's gone.
It happens. Thank you, Mrs. Skrull. Next on the agenda is executive session. Kings Board of Education will now enter into, I'll ask for a motion to enter into executive session to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official. May I have a motion to enter into executive session?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Morrow.
Mr. Skrull,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Ms. Cowan,
Yes.
Mr. Belfrom.
Yes. now exiting executive session. May I have a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting?
I will make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Ms. Cowan,
Yes.
Mr. Belfrom,
Yes.
Mr. Skrull. Yes. Ms. Phillips.
Yes.
Have a good night, everyone.